Welcome to DIYEasyCrafts.com. Today we're going to take a look at how to easily make ivory inlays. Now this particular project started when a knife customer asked me to make him a couple of custom knives and incorporate elk teeth, which he had taken with his father. And for sentimental reasons, he wanted them incorporated into the handles of two knives. This was a little bit out of my comfort zone. And the idea that we came up with was to inlay the shape of elk hoof prints into the handles. These are the teeth. And basically, I'm not claiming to be an expert at this. This is just my first attempt at doing ivory inlays. So I started out by cutting out vinyl stickers on a craft vinyl cutting machine that had the shape of the hoof prints. I put the female sticker onto the scale material, and in this case, it's water buffalo horn. And then I'm using a router ring attachment for a Dremel grinder with a very, very small router bit. And I'm going to use that to carve out that whole intersection using that vinyl sticker as my visual guide. So I can just very, very carefully carve out that horn material with the Dremel grinder. Now I had tried this with wood, I had tried it with a X-Acto knife, and just didn't have much success. The Dremel grinder really seemed to do the trick, especially with this routering attachment, which really keeps it nice and flat and level so that the walls of the cutout are nice and straight and vertical. And that's kind of important because you really want both parts, the male and the female, to match up perfectly. So I'm just very, very slowly, very carefully using that routering bit and blowing away the dust as it's created so that I could see the edges, and then carefully moving that line ever so slowly until it just matches up with the lines or the cutout on the vinyl self-adhesive sticker. It is definitely a little bit time consuming. You also need to have good eyes. Everything becomes blurry after a little while. But the whole process really didn't take that long. I had done a couple of practice pieces first, and after you do it one or two times, it really does become fairly easy. Time consuming, but easy. So I'm just bringing the back edge. You can still see some of the scale material protruding through that vinyl sticker. I'm just going to carefully trim that. I'm almost ready to start working on the teeth. Alright, so the first step in working on each tooth is to grind a flat. And you need to grind a flat that's large enough for two stickers to be placed for the hoof prints. I just did it on a disc grinder. It's an OBM disc grinder. That's what I ended up with. I think I used an 80 grit paper on that disc grinder. And then I'm going to adhere the hoof print stickers right to that flat surface of the tooth. I'm going to go back and forth from video to still pictures. It was really kind of hard to film this project because everything was so small, and I was really concentrating on not screwing up the teeth. I didn't do the best job filming the video, but I think you'll get the point, especially if I supplement it with a couple of still photographs. I'm using a cutoff wheel on the Dremel grinder, and I'm basically just going to cut a groove right down the center between the two hoof print stickers, kind of separating both. And then I will, here you can see the cut right down the center. Then I'm going to use that same cutoff wheel and I'm going to separate, or I'm going to cut off one side of that hoof print. So now I have a very small section of tooth to work with. Now I've switched the Dremel grinder to a drum sanding wheel. And I'm just going to run this at a slow speed. I don't want to remove too much material. I'd rather take my time and remove a very, very little bit at a time. I'm just going to carefully start to shape that so that it matches perfectly, or as perfect as possible, with that sticker. Then I'm going to try to fit it. Every time I try to fit it, I just take a real close look at what portion is rubbing, what portion is preventing that tooth inlay from sliding into the groove. I'll use a black magic marker just to indicate which areas need to come down a little bit. And then I'll go back to that drum sanding wheel with the Dremel and remove that black marker. The marker is really just a visual reference as to which areas have to be taken down. I'm not going to remove a lot of material very quickly here. And I forgot to mention earlier, on the inside of each of those grooves in the scale material or the handle material, I did drill a hole. That's kind of important because if you do get this small tooth or ivory wedged in place, you can always take a small drill bit or something and push it out from the back side. If you don't have that hole and you wedge it in place, it's really, really difficult to ever get it out. So after I'm satisfied that the tooth is carved to shape, I'm just using the back of a pair of pliers. And I did this because it has a rubber coating on it. To nice and gently tap that right down, right into the handle material. The water buffalo horn in particular I chose because it's going to give a nice contrast, a nice dark contrast to the white ivory, but it's also a little bit flexible. So as you're pounding or hammering this ivory into place, that scale material is actually flexing outward a little bit to accept that ivory. Once the ivory inlays are in place, I'm going to sand them off very, very lightly. This is in 80 grit paper. You don't have to do it on a belt sander. I have one that just makes it a little bit easier. So these are the two pieces of scale material with the ivory inlays in place. There's a couple little gaps, and what I did was I saved some of the grinding from all of the cutouts I did in that, with the water buffalo horn, basically water buffalo horn dust. And I'm just tapping that and pushing that into each or every little opening or every little space that remains. And the hope is that once this is glued in place, that will fill the voids and you won't even notice any little imperfections in the cutouts. I'm going to use CA glue. Now I looked at the local arts and crafts store. They didn't have any. I ended up getting this off of Amazon.com. It's a very, very thin liquid glue. It penetrates very quickly, deep along each one of those grooves, and it dries really hard very quickly. Equivalent of like a super glue. So I'm not going to show you the whole knife handle making process. I mean, this video is really about the inlays. I'm not going to sand these until they are attached to the knife handle. So I'm going to kind of fast forward here to where I've taken each one of these handles and I've cut them to shape and I've glued them onto the knife handle, and I put the pins in place, and I've kind of carved them to shape. The finishing is going to be just basically sanding. I'm going to sand with a 220 grit. Then I'm going to move to a 500 grit. And then eventually I'll go to 1,000 and also a 2,000. When working with this water buffalo horn material, really important to sand it at least to 1,000 grit. It just makes the polishing so much faster if you spend a little bit extra time, sanding to at least 1,000 grit. The hand sanding process always seems to just take forever. A lot of times I'll shape these scales or handle material on the machine, but I just didn't want to chance it with the Ivory Inlays. Now I use a felt belt on the same 2x72 OBM belt sander, belt sander, and I use this with a compound to do the very beginning of the polishing process. It does the flat surfaces really nicely. It polishes very quickly. But after this, I do have to go to a polishing wheel, buffing wheel, also with compound. When polishing the ivory, and especially the water buffalo horn, you have to have a very light touch. You're loading up the wheel with compound, and then you're just very lightly polishing, not grinding, polishing. Here's some images of the finished product. I was very pleased with the way that the Ivory Inlays came out, and of course you can use this process on a variety of different do-it-yourself arts and craft projects. This one just happens to be on a couple of knives. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I ask that you please comment on the video section, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. If you're interested in knife making, by all means, check us out on our Facebook group, Knives and Knife Making, and you can check us out on our website, DIYEasyCrafts.com, or my knife making website, which is Berg Knifemaking.com. Thank you very much.